الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا، اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مباركا مرحوما، واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما، ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم بلغنا رمضان، اللهم بلغنا رمضان، اللهم بلغنا رمضان. اللهم ارزقنا صيامه وقيامه على الوجه الذي يرضيك عنا. اللهم اجعلنا ممن قام رمضان وصامه إيمانا واحتسابا، واغفر لنا ما تقدم من ذنوبنا. اللهم اكتبنا فيه من عبادك المحسنين. اللهم اكتبنا فيه من عتقائك من النار. اللهم اكتبنا فيه من عتقائك من النار. اللهم اعتق رقابنا ورقاب آبائنا وأمهاتنا من النار، وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا رب العالمين. Oh Allah, we ask you to accept from us our deeds and to grant us guidance. Oh Allah, we ask you to bless us with understanding. Oh Allah, bless us to witness the month of Ramadan. Oh Allah, make it a month of ease and a month of guidance and a month of forgiveness. Oh Allah, record us among your excellent servants in the month of Ramadan. Oh Allah, forgive us our sins in the month of Ramadan. Emancipate us from hell in the month of Ramadan. Emancipate us from hell in the month of Ramadan. Bless us to witness Laylatul Qadr in the month of Ramadan. Oh Allah, bless us to witness Laylatul Qadr and grant us a forgiven sin in Laylatul Qadr ya Rabbil Alameen. Oh Allah, we ask you to bring ease to all our affairs, to facilitate for us our affairs, to bless us with guidance and steadfastness. Fill our hearts with your abundant mercy. Fill our homes with your abundant mercy. Guide us and guide our children and our offspring. Oh Allah, we ask you to guide us and guide our families. Oh Allah, guide us and guide others through us. Oh Allah, guide us and guide others through us, and make our last words in this dunya La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Oh Allah, we ask you to bring ease to all those suffering and all those in pain and all those in difficulty in the east and west. Oh Allah, bring ease to every Muslim who's facing hardship. Oh Allah, make it a Ramadan of fath and nasr and tamkeen and victory and unity for the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Oh Allah, we beseech you and we pray to you. You are the best one who to call upon, and you are the best one to answer. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ameen, ameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us all and to bless this night of ours, and to bless this house of worship, and to make it a house of dhikr and knowledge and activism and community. Allahumma ameen. Tonight we have a very special program in preparation for Ramadan. Ramadan is only a few days away. And tonight we're going to go over the ahkam, the fiqh of Ramadan. Last week we went over the inner dimensions of fasting, or the spiritual aspects of Ramadan. The sisters I think already have it, but I don't think we passed it to the brothers yet. Can one person take a packet and give it out to the brothers? Do all of the sisters have the packet, by the way? There was enough for the sisters? Okay, alhamdulillah. So, before we get into the packet though, I just wanted to turn your attention to this booklet. This booklet was passed out at Salat al-Jumu'ah today. We're still in the process of publishing and printing more so that everyone can have a copy. This booklet is basically the full program of Ramadan at ICPC. ICPC Clifton and ICPC Patterson. You're going to find the theme of the month this year is the Meccan period of the Seerah, or the life of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca. And we're going to be discussing different aspects of this in the Khawatir, the short talks at Fajr, and maybe some talks at night. One of the other things that we're going to have in the month is we're going to have i'tikafs on Fridays and Saturdays in the masjid here. Every i'tikaf is going to have a lecture at 12 a.m. And this lecture is going to be around reflections around the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to be a Quran reflection series. And that's going to be for the first 20 of Ramadan, those Fridays and Saturday i'tikafs. The last 10, of course, we're going to have i'tikaf every night. And we're going to have a special program in the last 10 of Ramadan around tazkiyah and purification of the soul. We're going to have khawatir and talks every night, maybe have some Q&A sessions, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a very blessed month for us all. Besides the i'tikaf programs, we have for the girls' youth a special program in the masjid here. Teenagers, for the girls on from 12 to 18. It's going to be on Saturdays here in the masjid after dhuhr in every Saturday of Ramadan. Every Saturday of Ramadan, one of our sisters is going to be delivering a lecture about topics also surrounding the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the life of the Prophet. Also, we're going to be having Sunday workshops, and this is for everyone, at Patterson, not here. It's going to be between me and Shaykh Qatanani. Shaykh Qatanani is going to be giving 1 week, and I'll be giving the other week. 1 week in Arabic, 1 week in English. That's the main programs, but there are also other programs. You'll find that all with the prayer times and the prayer timetable, the iqamah times, and all other programs in this booklet here. So if you don't have this booklet, make sure you get it or you ask about it, inshallah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us. The first night of Taraweeh is Tuesday. The first night of Taraweeh is Tuesday. So this packet is a very extensive packet that I put together that basically covers the most important rulings regarding the fiqh of fasting. Of course, you can send me your questions to this number throughout the talk, and inshallah I will answer them, and also I'll give you a chance to ask directly if you would like to ask directly. Imam, tfaddal Sidi. Anyone coming in late, there's more papers on the brother's side and the sister's side, you can take one. So if you could just turn to the second page of the book, you'll find that I have a little diagram for you here about the fiqh of fasting. What different discussions to have. And of course there are other things to have, but this is what I focus on. We're going to be going over some of the requisites, meaning the requirements for your fast. Some of the invalidators of fasting. And the recommended acts. Also making up fast, qada, in excusable circumstances. And the concept of kafara, expiations. All right. This is an overview of what's in this packet. To start, what does Ramadan and Siyam mean? I mentioned this last week, but just as a quick reminder, fasting or Siyam in Arabic means to stop and abstain. That's what it linguistically means. And that's why they say, Samat al-khayl, the horse does Siyam if it stops running, right? And also, it's said in the Quran, إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا. Who said this? Sayyidah Maryam. إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. She said, I have vowed for Ar-Rahman a fast. And what does this Siyam entail? This Siyam entails refraining from speaking with others. That's what she means by Siyam, by using it in this ayah. She doesn't mean that avoiding eating and drinking as we understand Siyam. No, it means to abstain. That's what Siyam means. And there's a beautiful meaning behind this, and we mentioned it last week, is that when you fast, it is a time for the nafs to halt and abstain and refrain from rushing after its every desires. It's for the nafs to experience a state of tranquility and itmi'nan. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ referred to Siyam as Junnah. Fasting is a protection. It's a protection from the individual being enslaved by his whims and his desires. And that's why one of the aspects of fasting is that when you find that there's a conflict brewing, that you say, you abstain and you say, Inni sa'im, I am fasting, I am fasting. So this is one meaning behind the word Siyam. Now, Ramadan, the meaning behind it is, as I say to you, to burn or to wash away. They say, Ramadat al-fisalu min al-har, the baby camels in the desert, when they could not sit on the ground in the noon time because of the heat of the ground, and they're still very young, the baby camels. It would burn, or it would cause them pain, burning heat, from the burning heat. So that's one of the meanings of Ramadan. It comes from ar-ramda, all right, and that's the burning heat of the desert. And the other meaning behind Ramadan is ar-ramad, and that is a cool rain that is in the Arabian Peninsula just before the fall time. So that rain comes down on the ground after it's been, after the scorching heat of the summer comes the fall rains, and they call this ar-ramad. And it's as though, in this sense, Ramadan is burning away and washing away your every sin, your every desire, and cleansing the soul. So this is a meaning behind the definition of Ramadan and Siyam. Of course, the technical definition is to avoid and abstain from everything that would invalidate fasting from the time of dawn to the time of sunset. And we're going to come to explain this in detail. But now the history about Ramadan. How did Ramadan come to be? There's a hadith that's in the packet there for you that explains that initially the first stage of fasting was the mandate of, I said it yesterday, anyone that was in the khatira, can you remind me? The mandate of what day? Ashura, which is the 10th of Muharram. The 10th of Muharram. This was required upon the Muslims to fast. And this was a fast that was known to the people of the book. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ would fast this day. And after this initial stage, Ashura became optional when the month of Ramadan was revealed. When the month of Ramadan was revealed, this was the second stage. It was initially an optional fast. It wasn't a required fast. And if you look at the hadith that I have for you there, it says at the very end of the page, in detail how fasting was prescribed for those before you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may obtain taqwa. And then it mentions in this hadith, which is an authentic hadith, if someone wished to keep the fast, he would keep the fast. And if someone wished to abandon the fast, he would feed a needy person instead of every single day. So this was the second stage of fasting. Allah did not require them to fast the full month. They would either feed a needy person or fast the day. But then, when Allah revealed, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ, and whosoever among you observes the month, then he must fast it. This was the third stage of fasting, and Ramadan was obligated upon every Muslim who witnessed it and was accountable for fasting it. So this is the three stages. Now, there's something we can learn from this, and I mentioned this in the khatira yesterday, is that many of the legislations of Islam came gradually, so that the companions would accept it and not reject. And that's why it's said in an authentic hadith in Sahih Bukhari that if the revelation, when it first came down, it came down addressing the hearts of people. And if the first thing revealed was, don't fornicate, we would have never abandoned fornication. And if the first thing revealed was, don't become intoxicated, we would have never abandoned alcohol and abandoned intoxication. So there's a gradual revelation during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, of course, we as Muslims in this day and age, after the shara'i' iktamalat and Islam has become completed, we cannot repeat the cycle. But there's something we can learn from this with our children. And that is, it's one of the rights of your children upon you, that you train them to make worship a habit. Don't deny your children the opportunity to pray and fast in the name of them being too young, quote unquote, and not wanting to bother them or make it a burden upon them. Once they reach the age of 7, you should begin training them to fast. Start with half days, or if they could do full days right away, then do it. If they cannot, then do half days and reward them for those half days. And try to distract them with other things so that they don't focus on their food and drink. And this is something that Sayyidah Aisha mentions in the report. And if you look at the section children fasting, there is at the very end a hadith that says that we used to make toys of wool for the boys, and if any one of them would cry, we would give them these toys till it was time for the breaking of fast. This is what the companions used to do, to try to get their children used to fasting. Now, when is it required upon your child to fast? It's required for you to train your child to fast at the age of 7, and to hold them accountable for not fasting at the age of 10. Same thing that we say for prayers. Now, when would they get sins for not fasting? That's when they reach the age of bulugh, and they're held accountable for their actions around the age of 13, 14, for some people 12. Bulugh comes at different ages depending on the body and depending on male and female. So, are children required to fast? No, they are not. Are they rewarded for fasting? Absolutely. However, there's something very important here that we should all consider, and that is the process of training our children, so that when they reach the age of bulugh, the idea of praying and fasting won't be something foreign to them. Now, Ramadan is coming back in the school year, and it's actually this Ramadan, I think, is going to be fully in the school year for our children. So many people are going to start asking questions. Can my child not fast if they have a big exam, a big test, and I'm afraid that it's going to hamper or hinder their ability to take this test? Having a test is not an excuse for abandoning fasting in and of itself, right? You should not train your child to make their academics more important than their worship. Now, of course, if during the course of fasting they get severe headaches and they get very weak and tired, then at that point, when they get very weak and tired and they get a headache and they can't continue, then you can give them an excuse to break their fast. But the idea of having a test, is that enough for breaking fasting? No, it's not. Okay? And the other question that we often get in this regard, my son, my daughter is playing for a sports team. They're going out in competitions or they're training. Can they break their fast for the sports team or for the competition? Now, of course, this question, the first question, it makes some sense to ask. But this question, many people ask this question is indicative that the person does not recognize the merit of Ramadan to compare it to being on a sports team or not. So, of course, this is without a question, not a reason to break the fasting. So that's about children fasting. Now, the discussion around the requirements for the validity of fasting is extensive. Here it's all summarized for you. You could keep it with you and you could read it on your own. And if you don't understand anything, you can always approach me, either through this number. This one number works during lectures and outside of lectures, or directly by coming to me with your question. First thing they mention about shurut sihhat as-sawm, the requirements for the validity of your fasting, is to have an intention. Of course, this is because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Indeed, actions are by their intentions, and each person will have but that which he or she intended. So, when to make this intention? Now, the scholars have different opinions about when to make the intention. And how do you make an intention? Do I have to utter certain words? No, you don't. Where's the intention? It's in the heart. They say about fasting, the intention is so easy. It even occurs by you doing certain actions that show that you're preparing to fast the next day. When you eat suhoor, this is like you preparing tomorrow for fasting. When you're awaking before Fajr and getting ready for brushing your teeth, applying some mouthwash, drinking some water. This all counts as an intention for fasting. You don't need to pause and say something or have certain words in mind in your heart to have an intention for fasting. Some scholars, the Maliki school, and this one's very easy, they say that it's enough for you to have an intention from the very beginning of the month for the whole month. Right? The Shafi'i school says that there should be some consciousness, and this happens without you thinking of it, by the way. So it's not an issue to really ponder about too long. You should have some consciousness about your intention every night during Ramadan. Now, why is this discussion important? When we have someone who's unconscious or in a coma, and he's unconscious for a day or for days, does this person have to make up their fasting? Did they have the intention to fast that day? No, they were unconscious. How could they have the intention to fast? So someone might say, well, they were unconscious for days. They didn't eat or drink or do anything that would invalidate the fast. So why would they have to make it up? But of course, because they did not have the intention to fast those days, all of those days would need to be made up. The other thing why this discussion is important is because there's an important difference between required fasts and recommended fasts. Required fasts, we're very particular about the intention. We need to make sure that before Fajr comes in, you are ready to go and ready to begin the fast. But for recommended fasts, it is much more lenient. Now, sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would wake up and he would go to the houses of his wives and ask them, is there any food? And they would tell him no. So then he would respond, then I today am fasting. Is it okay to have the intention after Fajr to fast that day? If it is a recommended fast, then absolutely. You have all the way until noontime, dhuhr, to have the intention to fast the rest of the day, as long as you didn't eat or drink for that day. But of course, for Ramadan, it is a different story. Tamam? Now, where else is this applicable and important? All right. Sometimes one of our sisters might go to sleep and she is in her menstrual cycle. But then she realizes after waking up, and she wakes up after Fajr time, she doesn't wake up before Fajr, that the blood stopped and her menstrual cycle is done. Can she fast that day? No, she cannot. Why can't she? Because Fajr passed and she did not have the intention to fast that day. Even though her blood technically had stopped while she was sleeping during the night. But because she did not have the intention to fast, because she went to sleep unaware that her blood had stopped, that's a reason why she cannot fast that day. And then so what should she do? She would just have to make that day up later on. Tamam? Let's leave the questions. Text them so you don't forget them, or write them down, and inshallah I'll give you a chance to ask them in the end. So try to write them down somewhere or text them so you don't forget. Going to the next page. So now where am I? I'm on page 4. Page 4. And now just to read for you the evidence, just to confirm what I just said about the recommended fasts. If you look at number 3, the evidence. The Prophet ﷺ came to the house of Aisha and he asked her, do you have anything for breakfast? She said, no. Then he said, I'm fasting. She said, one day he came to me and I said, O Messenger of Allah, I have received a gift for us. He said, what is it? She said that it is hais. And this was a food that they had during the time. So he said, I began the day fasting, but she said, he then ate. Right? So this shows you that with recommended fasts, the matter is much more lenient. You could have the intention anytime before the noon prayers. And also, if something happens, you get invited or some food comes your way, or you're out with friends and you want to break that fast, you can go ahead and break that fast, no problem. All right? But it's a different story with required fasts. All right. Now going to number 2. Avoiding all invalidators. All right. Now, of course, when does fasting begin? Fasting begins, technically, they say at the true dawn. What does true dawn mean? There is this concept in fiqh called false dawn and true dawn. Fajr kadhib and Fajr sadiq. The false dawn is before Fajr. And this happens about 15 to 20 minutes before Fajr comes in. And this false dawn is a streak of light that comes vertically in the horizon. Al-Fajr al-Kadhib, the false dawn, is a streak of light that comes vertically in the horizon. And after this streak of light, it goes back to darkness, right? And then 15 to 20 minutes after, the true dawn would come in. Now, if you look at number 2, if you go down to the second arrow, you will find a hadith that proves this. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were 2 companions who would make adhan. One of them was Sayyidina Bilal ibn Abi Rabah, and the second one was Abdullah ibn Maktum. And the Prophet ﷺ told the companions, Bilal, proclaims adhan at the end of the night, at the Fajr al-Kadhib. فَإِنَّ بِلَالًا يُؤَذِّنُ بِلَيْلٍ. So he said to them, فَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يُؤَذِّنْ ibn Maktum. So continue to eat and drink until you hear the second adhan, which is the adhan of Abdullah ibn Maktum. Now, why would there be two adhans? The first adhan would be like a warning, or to wake people up. Fajr is coming in after 15-20 minutes. Get ready for Fajr. Prepare yourself to stop eating if you're going to fast. And get ready to make your way towards the masjid for prayer. So that's why they had two adhans. So Bilal would make adhan at night. And that would be at the Fajr Kadhib, the false dawn. And the companions would continue to eat and drink. But when the second adhan came in, the actual time for Fajr, the actual time for dawn, that's when they had to stop eating and drinking. Now, the one that we have in our prayer timetables, is that the false dawn or the true dawn? The true dawn, of course. That's when the actual time for Fajr is. Right? So that's when you need to stop eating and drinking. Now, you'll find that there's different timetables during the month of Ramadan. You get one from this masjid, get one from that masjid. Sometimes there's a slight difference, a few minutes apart. Now, what should you do? There's this concept that they call imsak. And imsak is to abstain from eating and drinking before the time for Fajr comes in. And that's to protect your fasting. Right. By the way, brothers coming in late, there's packets here. I think there's still some left by the sisters. If you came in late, is there any more over there? Okay. You could get the packet from the back. Brothers coming in late, you could get the packet from here. Tamam? Right. So that's the concept of imsak. So this is something we recommend. Follow this prayer timetable, that the message prayer timetable in the packet. But if you can, avoid eating and drinking about 20 minutes before this time, so that you get your body ready, get everything out of your system, make sure you rinsed your mouth good and cleansed your mouth good, nothing remains in your mouth, and you're ready to go for your fasting. Now, there is this question that comes up. When the adhan is going off, can I continue eating or drinking as the adhan is being made? No, you cannot. What if I have some food and I'm about to put that food in my mouth? Or I actually have food in my mouth and I'm chewing it? You should not eat it. Now, why is this even a question? It's because there is a hadith that the majority of scholars weaken. This hadith says, when any of you hears the summons to prayer while he has a vessel in his hand, he should not lay it down until he fulfills his need from that vessel. This hadith is reported in Sunan Abi Dawood, and you'll find that I have commentary on the hadith for you on page 5 by Imam al-Bayhaqi. This hadith is a weak hadith at best, or even if we were to consider it an authentic hadith, we're talking about the first adhan, which is the adhan of Bilal. No way, if after the true adhan has come in, can you continue to eat or drink, whether it's for a minute or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. Right? So, this is a very important thing to note about the prayer time and when your fast begins. Now, on page 5, there's a number of questions there. They're in bold for you. What if I break my fast just a few minutes before Maghrib? If you break your fasts before Maghrib, it doesn't matter if you were mistaken. Of course, no one does this intentionally. It's usually maybe you thought the adhan was at one time, you misread the timetable, or someone made the adhan before its time. Now, I've heard this happen before, that there was a brother who was asked to make adhan in the masjid. They told him the prayer time came in, so he broke his fast and then he went to make adhan. But then after he made adhan, they told him, oh, you made it 2 minutes, 3 minutes early. So this brother, he didn't intentionally break his fast, but they ruined his fast for him because they told him to make adhan and it wasn't time yet. So what does he have to do? He has to make up that day. All right. So if you eat a few minutes before Maghrib, it does not matter. You did not fulfill the requirement. Is there any sin? No sin. You just have to make up the day. Now, what if you eat after Fajr comes in mistakenly? If you do it by accident and you thought that it was still night, sometimes you might get out of your bed and you're in a daze and you're drowsy and you just make your way towards the refrigerator and put some water in a cup and start drinking, and then one of your family members walks in and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Fajr adhan already went off," and you did not realize. Now, did you commit a sin? You did not mean to do this, so inshallah there's no sin. But will that day of fasting count? No, you need to make it up again later on. Now, this is different than someone who forgets that he's fasting. This is after you began your fast. The first one, why is this different? So this person, the fast did not begin yet for them. And they went and drank and ate, and that's why it's not going to count for them. What if someone during his fast, during her fast, forgets that they are fasting? And they just see, mathalan, a bag of M&Ms right in front of them, your children, and they go ahead and start eating the M&Ms, and then you tell them, "What did you do? You're fasting." And they say, "Oh, I forgot." They got so caught up with the M&Ms that they forgot that they were fasting. Right? So, what happens in this case? The Prophet ﷺ said about this case, فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. This person is different. Because this person forgot that they're fasting and they've already begun their fasting. So this person, they could continue to fast, and inshaAllah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, this is Allah having fed them and having given them drink. So inshaAllah, it will continue to count for them, and no blame upon them. One time they say, it's just a funny story. I know this, a lot of this is very serious, so let me just... So the one person was about to take a sip of water one time. So his friend was with him, and just before he drank from the water, he said, "Hey, no, don't drink, you're fasting." And the brother had forgotten that he was fasting. So jokingly he turned to his friend and he was kind of upset. He's like, "Why did you tell me? It would have been an opportunity for me to drink and my fast would have still counted." So this is just something funny that they mention about that. This is about someone who actually forgets. But what about that person who, and probably maybe some of the children might do this, I expect the elders won't do this, who goes to make wudu and keeps the water in their mouth for extra long. Alright, hoping that a few drops would go down their throat because it's so hot and the day of fasting is so long. No, of course, this is, you broke your fast on purpose if something goes down. Right? So this is something that you need to pay attention to. But what if, and this is going to come up with us, I'll just mention it now. What if someone excessively rinses their mouth and excessively blows their nose while they're making wudu? And then because of them doing this, right, so they were making wudu and they put water in their mouth and some water accidentally went down. This person, what is the ruling for their fasting? Who thinks they know? Can they continue fasting? Is it going to count? How many of you say yes? Raise your hand. Alright, a good number of you say yes. Actually, they say, the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, وَبَالِغْ بِالْمَضْمَضَةِ وَالْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا. And rinse your mouth thoroughly and blow your nose thoroughly except if you are fasting. So they say, if you do it thoroughly while you're fasting, then you've done something blameworthy. And if some water happens to go down your throat because of you doing this, then you have just caused your fast to be invalidated. No sin, inshaAllah, but you need to make up that day because you did something blameworthy, right? Now, what if you, I'll just mention also again another case. What if you throw up? Is this going to ruin your fast? If you say yes, raise your hand. Throw up. Does it ruin your fast? Alright. Most of you say no. And the majority are closer to being correct. There is one case when throw up would break your fast. When would that be? The Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever من قاء عمدا فعليه القضاء ومن ذرعه القيء فلا قضاء عليه. Prophet ﷺ said, whoever throws up against their will, not wanting to do so, it just happens, whatever, they feel sick or they smelt something so awful, they could not hold it back, it immediately comes out. Then this person there's nothing wrong with their fasting. But someone who had the capability to hold it back, right? Or it came out, this might be kind of disgusting, I'm sorry, but I need to clarify. Or it came out to their mouth and it didn't come all the way out and they allowed it to go back down their throat. Now, I know it's very disgusting, but it might happen sometimes. Someone throws up a little bit, it comes to their mouth, and they accidentally swallow it back down. All right. If you swallow it back down, then this ruins your fast. Or if you have the ability to hold it back and you don't hold it back, then also it will break your fast. But if it happens unwillingly and it just comes out, reaction, then there's no effect on your fasting. So let's get back to following the book. So going back just before it says about the invalidators of fasting, I think we're on what, page 5? Page 5, right? So there's a hadith that mentions this, that Asma bint Abi Bakr reports, we broke our fast during the time of the Prophet ﷺ on a cloudy day. And then the sun appeared. So the tabi'i, the successor, asked the companion, Asma bint Abi Bakr, were they ordered to fast in lieu of that day? And she replied, it had to be made up for. She replied, it had to be made up for. So that's the evidence that if you break your fast thinking that the day has finished, but then it appears that the day has not, that you need to make up that day. And this is an authentic hadith in Bukhari. Now, the invalidators of fasting. We mentioned a few already. We went out of order. But here's number 1. And, some of this isn't applicable for our young children, but we need to mention this because everyone needs to know. So, first one is relationships between a husband and wife. This, if it happened during the day of fasting, would be a major sin. But at night, of course, there's no issue with this. But you would be surprised to find out that in the early days of Islam, initially the ruling was different. And that was that in an individual in the early days of Islam, it was impermissible for spouses to have marital relations except after iftar and before Isha or sleep, whichever one came first. But then this ruling was abrogated. What does that mean? All right, there was a story. You see in the evidence, I mentioned a story for you about Qais ibn Sirma al-Ansari. And the story is that Qais was a hard-working man. And he came home one night after Maghrib. And he asked his wife if there was any iftar. Sisters in the back, please. So he asked his wife if there was any iftar. So she went to fetch some food for him to make for iftar. But when she came back, she found out that he was sleeping. So she said, as it says in the hadith, that she was very disappointed because she knew the ruling was that now Qais would need to wait to the next day to break his fast. This hadith is in Bukhari. If you read in that paragraph, when it was midday of the following day, Sayyidina Qais ibn Sirma fainted. And the Prophet ﷺ was informed about this. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, you are permitted to go to your wives at the night of fasting. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed also, and eat and drink until the white thread of dawn appears to you distinct from the black thread of dawn. So then this ruling was abrogated. It wasn't that if they slept during the night that they could not eat after they woke up. So you see how hard that ruling is, right? Imagine that. If you go to sleep after Maghrib and you didn't break your fast, what did you have to do? You had to stay fasting until the next day. That was extremely difficult. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ease for them, and the ruling was abrogated. And this is the incident that happened with Sayyidina Qais ibn Sirma al-Ansari. Until the white thread becomes clear from the black thread. So that's the first invalidator of our fasting, And this next section, I'll try to go through it a little quickly. Are other forms of intimacy between a husband and wife permissible? Here's the general rule for you. The fast would only be broken if something is secreted from the body, something comes out of the body. However, doing some of the following things might be sinful, even though it doesn't break the fast. And I have them highlighted there for you, whether it's masturbation or anything of the sort, or secretion of madhi, or the emission of semen. All of this is detailed for you. You can read it on your own, and I think it's very self-explanatory. Now, what about kissing? Can someone kiss while they're fasting? Now, the ruling depends. One time, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him, can a man kiss his wife while he's fasting? So the Prophet ﷺ told him yes. And then a short while later, another man came and he asked the same question. And the Prophet ﷺ told him no. So the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, how could you give two different answers to the same question? So the Prophet ﷺ told them, as for the first man, he's been married for a very long time. So a kiss that's done casually and without much thought would not really affect his fast. But the second one, I could tell he was newly married. And him kissing his wife very likely may lead to other things. So for that reason, I prohibited him from doing so. So because it would lead to the marital relations, which is prohibited. So is kissing haram during fasting? If it's done in a way or for people who it would not lead to anything else, then it's okay. Otherwise, it should be avoided and it is prohibited. Now we could go to the next points, inshaAllah ta'ala. Number 3. Go to number 3. Awaking in a major state of impurity. This is for brothers and sisters. Alright. For sisters, if you wake up and you're in a major state of impurity, you did not take a shower from menstruation or from other forms of major states of impurity, would that affect your fasting? Brothers, same question. Whether someone had some nocturnal emission during the night and you wake up and you need to take a bath, can you do that after Fajr, or will it affect your fasting? Who thinks it will affect your fasting? You can't fast for that day. Raise your hand. Few people. Everyone else? It doesn't affect your fasting? You're right. Tamam. If you wake up in a major state of impurity, it does not affect your fasting. And this is according to the majority of scholars. And there's a hadith about this in Bukhari. It says that the Prophet ﷺ used to take a bath in the morning, not because of a wet dream, and would continue his fast. Meaning because of other causes of major state of impurity. And he would continue his fast. You could take a bath after Fajr and it won't affect your fasting in any way. Intentionally throwing up. We already talked about this. The other thing, what about coughing up phlegm or mucus? Sometimes if you're sick, you're not very sick, so you still want to fast. Is this going to affect your fasting? Coughing up phlegm or mucus? As long as you keep it out of your body, if it comes from your chest and it comes out, and you keep it out, you're good, right? But if, again, same thing, and sorry to disgust you, if it comes back down or anything like that, it comes back down your throat, then it's going to affect your fasting. Otherwise, the coughing of phlegm or mucus doesn't affect your fast in any way. Now, we can go to the next page. Now, can you brush your teeth while you're fasting? Yes or no? If you say yes, raise your hand. Everyone's raising. Can you use toothpaste while you're fasting? Who says no? Raise your hand. Few people. No, as long as nothing remains in the mouth and you don't swallow any of that toothpaste down, you're good. You could brush your teeth while you're fasting. You could use toothpaste. You could even use mouthwash. No problem. As long as nothing goes down your throat. And that's why we encourage people to try to do it before Fajr. Because if after Fajr, there's a good chance that something might stay in your mouth and you might accidentally swallow it. So, but does it in itself break your fast? No, it does not. As long as you don't swallow anything from that. Right? So it's very important to note this. Now you want a packet? Anyone else came late that they need a packet? Who else needs a packet? I think you took 2. Did you take 2 or 1? 1. Any others over there? Any others by the sister side? No? Okay. Maybe if someone could tell Sister Dia to make some copies, then she can make some copies downstairs for you. One of the sisters, if you could please go downstairs and tell Sister Dia, she'll make a few more copies so that you can get. Alright. Now, those are some of the things that break your fasting. Now, is it recommended for you to brush your teeth after you fasting? Look, they say if after midday, after dhuhr time, it's recommended you don't brush your teeth anymore because of fasting. Why? Your breath might start stinking, right? But there's a hadith that says, لَخَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. The change of smell in the mouth of the one fasting is more beautiful to Allah than the smell of musk, right? So the reason why they say it's disliked to brush your teeth midday. Now, of course, after Fajr, it's a different story because you're brushing your teeth maybe from the effects of suhoor or eating at night. But midday, the change in the smell of your mouth is going to be from fasting. So that's why they say it's best not to brush your teeth midday. Just leave it as it is because this is something dear to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is part of the effects of fasting on your body. So leave it as is. So they say it's disliked, but it won't invalidate your fasting. Right? Now, the next thing, number 5, is, and sorry, before I mention, alright, no, it's going to come with us. Number 5, eating or drinking. And we obviously know that this is going to invalidate your fasting. But there's something that they mention here. And look at this, it's a very particular definition. It says this includes intentionally allowing any substance to enter into a body cavity from an open passageway. What does this mean? This is a loaded definition. We're going to go into it inshaAllah ta'ala. So now if you smell, say like incense for example. You guys know incense, right? If you smell incense, is this going to break your fasting? No, it's not, because there's no substance going down your throat. It's just a smell. You're getting the athar and the effects of the incense, right? Now, if you smoke, is that breaking your fasting? Of course, because there's a substance and there's chemicals going down. Smoking definitely breaks your fasting, right? But now, smelling food, is that going to break your fasting? No. Sisters, when you're cooking, if you taste the food with your finger and you put it on your tongue and you don't swallow the food, you just want to taste its sweetness or its bitterness, alright? You just put it on your tongue and then you spit it right back out. Is that going to affect your fasting? No, you did not swallow it, so there's no problem. If you put it on your tongue and then you spit it back out, no effect on your fasting whatsoever. It needs to go down your throat to what we call a body cavity. And that's because there's a statement by Ibn Abbas that it says, wudu is required when something leaves the body. Whereas breaking the fast happens when something enters the body. Wudu is required when something leaves the body, and then fasting is required when something is broken when something enters, when something leaves the body. Sorry, is when something enters the body. Tamam. All right. So now, what happens if you swallow the effects of the food between your teeth? Right? You didn't use floss. You ate some biryani. I don't know why you would eat biryani at suhoor, but say you ate biryani. You ate some chicken. You ate something that leaves a whole lot of food between your teeth. And you didn't use floss. So, is that going to break your fasting if that food that's between your teeth is swallowed? Is that going to break your fasting? Alright, so you have to try your best to avoid this. However, they say, if you do everything in your power to avoid it, but still something remains and it just flows with your saliva, then you're not going to be held accountable for this. So some people, it becomes an issue of waswasa and whispers with them. We don't want waswasa, we don't want whispers. You try your best, you clean your mouth to the best of your ability. If something remains between, by the gums and everything like that, that you could not reach, and it happens to be swallowed unknowingly, it's okay. Inshallah, your fasting would be accepted. You didn't do it intentionally. Alright? So now, there's another question. And we already answered what if one swallows their own phlegm or mucus. Swallowing your own saliva. Of course, does this break the fast? Absolutely not. This is without a question. Mucus, like we said, the only time that it could foreseeably break your fast is if it comes out and then you swallow it back down. But saliva, can it ever break your fast? No, of course not. So we have some brothers, some sisters, during Ramadan, it becomes what we call a spit fest. Alright? Spit fest. Some brothers, they spit 10, 15, 20 times into the sink, and they have napkins and they keep on spitting, spitting, spitting. This is what we call waswasa, whispers, right? If you find, how could the shaitan whisper during Ramadan? That's a different discussion. Let's leave it. But they say that there's a discussion about it, by the way. Are all the devils locked up during Ramadan, or just the big ones and the major ones? This is a different discussion. We won't get into it. Anyway, the point is, this is something, whether it's whispers or something mentally, you need to stop doing it. Don't excessively spit during Ramadan, right? You could be careful if you're going to take a shower. Make sure that you have your mouth sealed so nothing goes in your mouth accidentally. But your mucus, your saliva doesn't affect your fast at all. Okay? So, the first thing in the definition is a substance that enters into a body cavity. If you want to know where I am, I'm at the bottom of the page. Sorry, these pages should have been numbered, but they're not. So it's, I think it's 2, 4, 6. Bottom of page 7. Bottom of page 7. Tamam? So, to enter into a body cavity. What is a body cavity? This is very important to understand. This includes the head, the bladder, the intestines, the pancreas, the liver, right? And so on and so forth. So this is what a body cavity is, or the throat, they include it under that definition as well. So now, it needs to enter into a body cavity. This brings up the discussion about eye drops, ear drops, nasal insufflation or nasal, inhalers, nasal inhalers. All of this, does it break your fasting? So at the very bottom of the page, I have for you, insufflation or nose drops would also invalidate the fasting. So, and that's because the hadith, cleanse the base of your fingers and sniff water deep into the nose, except when you are observing fasting. That's why we said, when you blow your nose while you're making wudu, you need to be careful. Because if anything goes down, then it would break your fasting. What about inhalers? Right? We have some people who use inhalers. They're sick, they need to take their inhalers, they have asthma or whatever it is, and they need to use their inhaler. Does the inhaler break the fast? Now, who says yes or who says no? I just asked you a question like that. Does the inhaler break the fast? Yes? Raise your hand. No? Raise your hand. Most of the people say no. So when we're talking about inhalers, we have different types. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the asthma inhaler that has chemicals in it? Or are we talking about something like an oxygen mask, or the machine that they put that has oxygen, CPAP machine? It's just bringing out air. Now, the thing that brings out compressed air, this absolutely does not break your fast in any way. Forget about it. Because air being blown into your lungs does not break the fast in the least. All right? So we need to differentiate the inhaler. Is it compressed air? Doesn't break the fast at all. All right. Now, what about the regular inhaler that has chemicals in it? Does that break your fast? There is a difference of opinion about this. The traditional opinion says yes, because the chemicals are going down your throat. And the throat, they count it as a jawf, a body cavity. But now, many modern scholars and many majami' fiqhiyah, they say that the inhaler that has the chemicals does not break your fast, because those chemicals aren't going down to your bladder. They're just staying in your throat. They're expanding the passageways to make it easier for you to breathe. So many modern scholars, they say that inhalers don't break your fast. So now, if we were to follow the opinion that says it does break your fast, what would you do then? What would someone who needs to use their inhaler do? What would they do? We're going to tell them one of two things. If you could possibly use this machine, the oxygen mask, or for the thing for the chest with the chemicals, if you could use that at iftar time and suhoor time, then you must do that. But then if it becomes a necessity for you to use it during the day, then you are someone who is excused from fasting. This is what we call a chronic illness. Now we need to ask you the second question. Is this all year round, or is it during certain seasons? If it's during certain seasons only that it becomes really necessary for you to use the inhaler a lot, then we're going to tell you that no, you need to make up the fast during a time when you don't use the inhaler that much. But if there is no time and you're using it all year round and it happens all throughout the day and you have a severe case of asthma or whatever it is, then we're going to say to you, you have a chronic illness, and what are you expected to do? You pay what we call fidya. You pay, instead of fasting, a monetary amount of about $10, more or less, for every day of fasting. So instead of fasting, you pay money, because you have a chronic illness, and this illness is going to stay with you. So you don't fast. But you could follow the other opinion that says the inhaler doesn't affect your fasting in any way. That's the reason why I have some multiple opinions in this booklet for you. If you, sometimes certain situations, certain difficult circumstances warrant ease. Alright, that's what they say, one of the principles of the scholars, al-mashaqqa tajlibu at-taysir. So for those people who are in a very difficult situation, they can follow this opinion that's held by many scholars, that the inhaler does not break the fasting. Alright. Now, next question. If one does any of the invalidators of fasting, forgetting that he is fasting, does it invalidate his fast? All right. I think I skipped one. Sorry, there's one question before that. This is a very important one. What is the ruling of the needle injection during fasting? What is the ruling of the needle injection during fasting? Does the needle injection break your fast? If you say no, raise your hand. This is at the very bottom of page 7. All right, only 3 people raise. All right. If you say the needle injection breaks your fasting, raise your hand. If you say I don't know, raise your hand. If you're not following along with me, raise your hand. Some people did not raise their hand for anything. So it must be you're really not following along. Even when you're asked if you're not following along, you don't raise your hand. Anyway, I'm just joking with you guys. Is the needle injection something that breaks your fast? Pay attention with me. Can you draw blood while you're fasting? Absolutely. No problem at all. Taking blood from your body doesn't break your fast at all. Okay? But now, what about the injections? There's different types of injections. If you look at the paper with me, they say that there's something called intramuscular injection, or I think they call it a subcutaneous injection. This does not affect the fast. Right? Big word, right? What type of injection is this? This is the injection that is in the upper arm, or the buttocks, or the thigh, or the back. Does this affect your fasting in any way? Not at all. Doesn't affect your fasting in any way. What about al-huqna al-waridiyya? The injection into your veins, and that's the intravenous injection. Does this break your fast? Does it? If it does, raise your hand. You read the paper. So if it does, raise your hand. A number of you raise your hands. They say there's the 2 following opinions. One opinion, and this is the Shafi'i school, it says it doesn't affect your fast in any way. This is the predominant Shafi'i opinion. There's a difference of opinion in the Shafi'i school, but the predominant opinion is the intravenous injection doesn't break your fast in any way. But many scholars have a detail to the opinion. They say, is it a nourishing injection? Is it مغذية للبدن or not? If it nourishes the body, then they say it breaks your fast. And this is the opinion that I encourage you following. It's the more precautious opinion. Some Shafi'i scholars hold this opinion, and many modern scholars hold this opinion. If, like, what are we talking about? Like the glucose, when you go to the hospital and they put glucose in your arm. Glucose nourishes the body. It's just like eating and drinking, right? It gives you strength, right? So having glucose in your system through a needle is going to break your fast according to many scholars. So if you have something, you go to the hospital, you have some procedure needed to be done, that's okay. You could have it. If it needs to be done during Ramadan, you could go ahead and have it. Just make up that day later on. Alright? So that's about the intravenous injection. If it doesn't nourish the body, then it goes back to the opinion of the vast majority that it doesn't affect your fast in any way. Alright? So that's about injections. What about eardrops? Does it break your fast? Traditionally, many scholars said yes. But modern scholars, many of them, they say no. Right? Now, going for a swim, based on the opinion that says yes, does that break your fast? No, it doesn't, because when you put your head underwater, the water isn't going right to your head, right? If the ear is blocking it from going in. If the water went right to your head, then we would all die. Maybe a little bit water could get in if you stay underwater for a long time, but otherwise, if a lot of water flows in, then, or for example, if you use a Q-tip, and it goes, and you use it in a very damaging way, and you put it inside the ear canal a little bit. Now, can this break your fast? According to that traditional opinion, they say yes. But according to many modern scholars, they tell you, eye drop doesn't break your fast. Eardrop doesn't break your fast. The nasal inhaler, only if something goes down to your throat, does it break your fast. Is everyone clear on that? Everyone clear on that? Should I repeat it? Eye drop doesn't break your fast. Eardrop, there's a difference of opinion about it, but many modern scholars, they say, doesn't affect your fast, right? The nose inhaler, if you feel something go down to your throat, then many scholars say it breaks your fast. All right. The inhaler for the mouth, many modern scholars say no, and the traditional opinion is yes. That's the one other than the air compressed, the compressed air. Those are the invalidators of fasting. Now, if you invalidate your fast forgetfully during your fast, then does taking in anything of the invalidators during your fast forgetfully break your fast? No, it does not. We already addressed this before, and the hadith is there for you. This is the end of the section about the invalidators of fasting. I'm going to pause here for a minute, and I'm going to open the door for you guys to ask questions, because after this we're going to go into making up days of fasting. Who has questions? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so how does it play out? You know, the way that we can imagine this is if a sister knows she has a regular cycle, it's usually 7 days, right? For example, it's on the last day of her cycle, she's expecting it to stop at any moment. So she prepares herself, it usually doesn't go on to 8 days. She prepares herself, tomorrow I am going to fast because I should be pure by the morning. But then she goes to sleep and she doesn't take the shower. But she wakes up after Fajr. She had the intention because she knows it usually doesn't go to 8 days. It's usually 7 days, and this is a regular thing every single month for her. So this is the example of that. So she woke up after Fajr. She's still in a major state of impurity. But now she just washes up and she fasts the day. Right? Another thing, another cause of this would be marital relations. If the husband and wife have marital relations, then they go to sleep without doing the full body wash. This is an example for both men and women. Clear? Okay, tamam. There's another thing that we should clarify for our sisters, for menstruation. If the menstruation cycle ends a little bit after Fajr, alright, so like in the morning, the blood stops, can you fast the rest of the day? No, you can't, of course, because the Fajr time passed and you are still in a state of menstruation. Now, you begin fasting the day, and it reaches Asr time, and there's only 2 hours left until sunset, and then you get the menstruation. Does the fasting for that day count? Who says yes? Anyone? Good, no one says yes. Yes, that is correct. If you get menstruation during the day, even if it's only a little bit before Maghrib, then that day is not going to count. Well, some of you might say, well, that's like, why? That's not fair. She fasted part of the day. She fasted most of the day. Why didn't it count? You got so close. You're only an hour away and it would have counted. Right? Isn't this not fair? So we say to this that no, fasting isn't a form of punishment. Fasting is actually a beautiful spiritual experience. Her fasting most of that day, she's going to get the reward for that. But for her to protect her fasting, she needs to make it up with a full day later on. This is not a form of punishment. Alright, so just to clarify to you. Any other questions? Who has a question? Any questions? Raise your hand. Go ahead. For the what type of people? For the allergies. Can you take this allergy medicine at the time of suhoor? You can, right? So if you could take it at the time of suhoor, you must. Right? What if you forget? If it's going to become a severe situation and you're going to become very ill, then we're going to tell you it's okay for you to break your fast if it's going to be very ill. If you're going to become very ill if you don't take it. But if it's just going to become mildly discomforting and it's going to become uncomfortable, you're going to get some allergies and it's going to bother you, then we're going to tell you don't take it until iftar time. Okay? Who has questions? 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 Oh, of course, yeah. So what we're saying is, say you wake up, مثلا, Fajr goes at 6 o'clock, مثلا. You wake up at 5:30. Adhan of Fajr was at 4:30, مثلا. So now the day of fasting began. Now, is this a problem that you're in a major state? أنت عندك حدث أكبر وبدأت الصيام، بدأ يوم الصيام. Is it a problem? I'm going to tell you, no. But you have to take the shower, and then of course you're going to pray Fajr, and you continue fasting. ما في أشكال. تمام. I have a question here. I was wondering what the ruling for a woman whose menstruation period lasts longer than 10 days. Is she required to fast after that point? Now, the maximum period for menstruation is different according to the different madhabs, different juridical schools. Why do we have different opinions? There's no problem. This is in details of Islamic law. And this is a source of great mercy for the ummah. This is not a source of division. Alhamdulillah that we have multiple opinions, that if one is difficult for some to follow, we have others that you can follow. Now, one opinion among the scholars is the Hanafi school. They say that the maximum period for menstruation is 12 days. Right? 12 days. That's a maximum. Even if it's not usual, it's not common, so it's a maximum by them, 12 days. That means if it goes beyond 12 days for any period, then they're going to consider it what we call istihada, or blood that isn't from menstruation, and she should wash up after the 12 days and fast even if blood continues to come down, because that's probably due to some type of injury or illness or something and she needs to go to the doctor. Right? So that's the Hanafi school. The Shafi'i school is a little bit longer. They put it at 15 days, which is a very long time. And they say that if it goes beyond 15 days, then the same ruling would apply. So after 10 days, no, don't wash after 10 days. After 12 days, according to one of the respected opinions, you can after that wash up and fast any day after that. Or not you can, you should, all right, according to that opinion. You should wash up and continue to fast. And pray, of course. Now, what is a brief explanation of why we fast for non-Muslims? That's the second question I got. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to need to ask to excuse me from that question. We'll address it at another time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Any other question about the invalidators before I discuss the last section? أي بالضبط. Jazakallah khair, barakallah feek. So he asked two questions. He said the first one about the unconscious person. We said that because he could not make an intention, his fasting would not count, right? He says that they say from the requisites of obligation of fasting is to be sound of mind. And one of the defects that they mention about soundness of mind is being in a coma. And you're not someone who's mukallaf. So both of them apply. طبعا لا يجب عليه الصوم لأنه في غيبوبة. طبعا لا يجب عليه الصوم. And can someone say, is it going to be يصح منه؟ هل يقال فيه مثل ما يقال في الطفل لا يجب عليه لكن يصح منه؟ لا يصح منه. لماذا لا يصح منه؟ لأنه لا نية له. He doesn't have any intention. So we need to do both. Alright? So إذا قلنا لا يجب عليه فربما يظن ظان أنه مثل الطفل لا يجب عليه لكن يصح منه. أما الذي في الغيبوبة لا يجب عليه ولا يصح منه. لا يجب عليه لأنه فاقد العقل ولا يصح منه لأنه لا نية له. فالاثنين مع بعض, we need them. So I addressed him in Arabic because he asked a question in Arabic. The one who's unconscious, he's not obligated to fast. And of course, because he's not in a state of mind to be held accountable for his actions. And can someone say, well, the fasting would be valid from him? No, of course he's not, because he doesn't have ahliyah to fast, right? He doesn't have any intention. He cannot have an intention, right? So both of them, لا يجب عليه ولا يصح منه, right? Same thing we say about the حائض, لا يجب عليها ولا يصح منها. But الطفل لا يجب عليه ويصح منه, because he can make a niyyah, he can have the intention. So we need both. The second thing you mentioned was yes, about the ha'id, the woman in menstruation. She doesn't have the intention at night to fast, and Fajr came in, and she was in a major state of impurity. We said her fasting for that day is not going to count. Does she need to abstain from eating and drinking for the rest of the day? صح كده? Alright, this is the question that he had. Does she need to abstain from eating and drinking the rest of the day? We're going to say that this is, wallahu alam, from what I remember, at least according to the Shafi'i school, recommended for her, right? In certain cases it would be required, and in certain cases it would be recommended. When would it be recommended? If the person is excused from not fasting that day, right? إذا كان في عذر, or this person هي نامت وما نوت من الليل لأن كان العذر قائم ولكن انتهى العذر وهي نائمة. Alright, so udhr, the excuse for not fasting, stopped during the night. And she was sleeping. She wasn't in a state of taklif. So we're going to say that it's strongly recommended for her to observe fasting apparently, even though it is not going to count as though she fasted. Alright, so basically, in other words, sisters, if you have that situation where the fasting is not going to count, then don't go all out eating and drinking, and it's recommended for you to avoid that even apparently, just so you could be in the state of Ramadan even when you're not fasting. Right? When is it required for you to abstain from food? It is required for you to abstain food if you accidentally break your fast. فَيَجِبْ عَلَيْكَ الِالْتِزَامِ بِالصِّيَامِ ظَاهِرًا. You need to observe fasting apparently until nightfall, because you broke fasting accidentally. Even though it's not going to count from you, you need to make it up later. Yeah. Yeah. So about the differences of opinion, we always encourage people to try to be precautious the best they can. But if it becomes difficult, as our scholars said, like Imam Nawawi, he said, فَمَنْ أَصَابَهُ شَيْءٌ مِّن ذَلِكَ فَلْيُقَلِّدْ مَنْ أَجَازَ. If you're in a difficult situation and there are those who allow, then you can follow those who allow, if in difficult circumstances. Otherwise, general precedent is it's good to be precautious. And it's good to avoid areas of doubt. So if you could do the more precautious route, wherever that is, then do it. Otherwise, if you want to follow the path of ease, then you're allowed to do that too. This is a khilaf, and there's a mercy in this khilaf. No problem. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other questions? We have a very important section to discuss, and that is about the excuses of not fasting. This is very important. What questions come up? When you're pregnant, when you're breastfeeding, right? When you're temporarily ill, when you have someone who is elderly, when you get so exhausted and dehydrated during the day and you need to break your fast. Can you do this? This is a very important thing that we're going to discuss. I think it's time for Maghrib, for Isha, I mean, right? It's time for Isha. So we're going to pray Isha, and we're going to discuss this last section about Ahl al-A'dhar, and we're going to discuss a little bit about Qada right after we pray Salat al-Isha, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Someone please make adhan.